Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Today's show is brought to you by OnPay, the new standard in payroll. You can pay employees and contractors in minutes, automate your payroll taxes and filings, as well as provide health benefits and HR in all 50 states. For more information, visit buildingthefutureshow.com/onpay. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Joel Primus. He's an entrepreneur, explorer, and transformational life coach. Joel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you're doing currently is really innovative and cool, but you've also done some really cool and innovative stuff, and you are still doing some really cool, innovative stuff. So maybe before we get into all that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
I mean, to me, that's interesting. That may be the least interesting part. I grew up, I grew up in a town called Abbotsford, which is about 60-ish minutes, depending on traffic, outside of Vancouver. But when I was a kid, that was like forest, and you could play roller hockey out in the streets and never have to worry about, a car. And we get lost in the creek behind my house for like every minute after school up until the point we were called for dinner. It was more of a small town then than it is now. Now it's kind of stuck somewhere in between Vancouver and Edmonton,
Fair enough. Yeah, no, that's fair. And then you're so close to the US border too, right? Or were.
That was always convenient because we were always making runs down to Seattle to visit the Costco there, Nordstrom's there, all these different buyer partnerships that we had with one of my companies. So it was super conveniently located.
That's awesome. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
I went to university. I didn't finish. So what had happened was I used to be an elite runner. At least in my head, I was elite. Okay. And I represented Canada when I was still in high school. I was provincial champion, and nothing about being an elite runner makes you cool in high school. I'll tell you that much. But or get you a girlfriend for that matter. But I enjoyed it, and it taught me a lot. It framed a lot of my mindset going into becoming an entrepreneur, which we can get into later, Kevin. But
sure.
So long story short, I ended up down in North Carolina on a scholarship.
Oh, interesting.
And in my freshman year, right after I qualified for the World Cross Country Championships, I ruptured my Achilles. And that didn't necessarily end my running career, but it became the beginning of the end of my running career. And so there was this sort of, I'd done, the freshman year down there. And then after that, I came home to get medical attention in Canada on my Achilles. And I tried to make a couple of comebacks, and I had a few good races, but I just kept getting re-injured and re-injuring my different parts of my body after that first really bad Achilles injury. And so one day I just decided to throw in the towel, and I hitchhiked across Canada, went through Edmonton, partied on White Ave, was it?
White Ave.
When I was there, just like a total complete shift. And so in between that and some traveling, I was in university, and I was taking philosophy, some business, some English, and then a little company I'd started called Naked got picked up and went on Dragon's Den.
Okay. What made you start that, and why? Sorry to cut you off, but I think that story is relevant because I think for a lot of people, like, you didn't graduate college, which I don't think there's anything wrong with, but like, I think like I'm trying to prove that like you can do it kind of no matter what. Right. And that story alone is like complete proof of that. And Dragon's Den, which you just mentioned, for the American audience, it's basically like the Canadian version of Shark Tank.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have regret. I feel in my gut, or maybe in my heart, like that pang of, I still should have finished. And so I totally commend anyone who goes through the motions, but not through the motions. That's not a fair way of describing a dedicated post-secondary education. But what happened for me was, so I hitchhiked across Canada, and then I went over to Thailand, and I got really inspired about this idea of how travel can truly change the world and make the world a more peaceful place, connect us, show us just those very human elements that we all have. We all laugh, we all cry, we all love our families, and it's our traditions that might be different, but our humanness is the same. And so I had this grand idea when I came back from that trip, to film this documentary about traveling the world. And so my brother and I, we spent our savings. We bought a video camera. We worked 2 jobs at a bar and landscaping, and we set out to literally travel the world.
That's awesome.
And we, I think that the grand total of sponsors I had was 1, and it was my old company. They gave us $250, and then my brother told me that, well, actually they owed him $250 on his paycheck. So in fact, it wasn't any any sponsorship at all. Not that it made any difference. So we went all the way from Mexico down to Santiago, Chile.
Wow.
And when I was in Peru, I needed some underwear. We've been at it for a couple months, and I had all this crap underwear that just was destroyed by the time I got there. And so we were in this night market, and I picked up this pair of Pima cotton underwear. And for those who don't know Pima cotton, it's like a premium, soft, high-grade cotton. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this feels so much better than anything my mom ever bought me. But then I hiked up Machu Picchu wearing the product. I'm like, yeah, once you start sweating in it though, it kind of doesn't feel as good. And so all of a sudden it was like, ding in my mind, how do I take that performance fabrics and qualities and properties that I was used to in my running clothes and marry them back to this very soft, luxurious feel, and create something that was so comfortable you couldn't even feel it. And so what ended up happening was that eventually our video camera fell off a cliff, and my brother didn't really want to do it. Was in the Atacama Desert, and we were morons. There's like these kind of really beautiful independent rock structures.
Okay.
And we set up the camera on one, and like we tied it down and weighed it down, and then we went and we climbed up another one. And then this gust of wind, we just watched it happen, just like knocked the camera off the rock structure. And it just fell to its demise, and we're like, oh my gosh. So to make that story, long story short, nothing really happened with that film until many, many, many years later. And instead, I kind of came home just thinking about this underwear line, and I decided to start trying to make an underwear business, having zero idea how to do so. So that's kind of how we ended up on Dragon's Den. Was then somebody heard, oh, Naked, that's the name of this underwear. It was the name of the company. That'd make a great Dragon's Den bitch. So we went on there with like literally not a single sale, no stores. I mean, we were just grasping at straws, but we kind of had this inflection point where, because we had accepted the appearance on the show, we had like 2 months to prep the entire business as best we could, from like nothing to presentable. And the byproduct of that was I was called delusional, and I deserved it.
All right, fair enough.
That was Brett. Brett said, you're delusional. You have no idea. At the time, my ego kicked in and was like, I certainly do. But looking back, I certainly did not have any idea what I was doing.
No, that's interesting, because I remember seeing the episode actually with you guys pitching. Like I remember it. It's like when we got connected, I went and like I just like, I remember it. And I remember, it's just funny.
I'll
Because,
never,
yeah.
I'll never live taking, I'll never live it down taking off my clothes on national TV. It is, it is not all my clothes, obviously, but
No, no,
it wasn't a
yes.
full Monty. It was just
Yes.
down to the boxer shorts.
Sure. So, but walk us through Naked's like company, because it became really successful.
It became pretty successful. I think that it was one of those companies that had the age-old challenge of it. It was tripping over itself because it was growing really fast, and it had the dual aspect of being a public company way too early, and that essentially meant that two entrepreneurs, myself and my partner Alex McCulley, and our very small team of incredible people, were running two businesses of which we didn't know how to run, and we're learning on the fly, not just one. And and so it was always kind of challenged in that regard. And the success, obviously, of a startup is your ability to get past that point. And we did. You know, what ended up happening was, so the Dragons Den happened. We didn't get a deal done, but as things tend to go in the world, somebody called us and was like, hey, you know, I saw your show and I'd like to get involved. And that was thanks to Arlene Dickinson's comment of a brand like Naked comes around once in a lifetime or something to that effect. And that like little zinger erased a lot of the bad that people had heard, you know, being called delusional, et cetera. And so it was really kind of neat to see that connectivity. And so we ended up going to Calgary, raised a little bit of money, and then next thing you know, I'm knocking on the door of stores like Holt Renfrew, which for your American guests is like the Neiman Marcus of Canada, and the Hudson's Bay Company. And next thing you know, we have an order, and this is a classic entrepreneur story of of epic failure proportions, Kevin. So Holt Renfrew gives us an order for 1,000 pairs, which is,
Okay.
is a huge deal. We're like over the moon. And I'm like, okay, so, you know, what do we have to sell through each week? What do we need to kind of forecast for? And they're like, well, our top selling brands sell like, I don't remember what it was, like 1,000 pairs nationwide a week or something like that. But you're talking top selling brands. Right. And so immediately in my head, I'm like, well, Naked will be a top selling brand. So I tell my business partner, we need to order 20,000 pairs of underwear. And this is all in like the turnaround of like 2 months or something like that. Like it's just a ridiculous turnaround. But fortunately, we were making the product in Canada, so we had kind of control over that part of the process.
Nice.
And so, yeah, my business partner's like, are you sure, man? Like, why don't we just start with 4,000? You know, and maybe we'll buy some extra fabric. I'm like, nope. You know, brash young 22-year-old. And so we do it, and you know, sales go okay. You know, we're selling some, like nowhere near. So I got like 19,000 pairs of underwear sitting in my garage. Well, originally garage, then warehouse, and then somebody calls up and they're like, I know why you call this company Naked. I'm like, why? He's like, because the underwear doesn't stay up. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, they literally fall down. Wow. I'm like, are you serious? And you know, then we do some investigation, and like we'd done product testing with our friends, and every one of them probably lied on their product feedback that the underwear fit great. And on me, it fit fine, but it turned out that like our size large and extra large customers, like the underwear just shot off them because of the way it was designed. And so now, not only do I have 19,000 pairs of underwear sitting in my warehouse, it's more or less entirely defective. And wow. I had spent all the investors' money, or most of it, on placing that order. And so, you know, we were like, it's painful to recount.
Sorry, man.
I mean, I guess I volunteered the story, but we were we were so far behind the eight ball because of that. And what I ended up doing was like, we ended up fixing the product in this crazy whirlwind thing. And then I literally drove across the country, went to every store that we were in, all the Holt Renfrews, and showed them like that we'd fixed it. And every customer we could possibly track down, we called them and sent them a new pair.
Wow.
And, you know, small potatoes. This isn't Calvin Klein at the time. You know?
Sure, but still.
And
But I think what I'm trying to get at here, though, is like, you could have just easily packed it up and said, like, forget it, we're done, right? But like, you basically turned this thing around after something, and I think a lot of people would have just given up.
I think, yeah, I mean, it was an easy point to say we're done, and it was an easy point for, call it the universe or just whatever, the business world in general, to say you're done.
Yeah.
You messed up, you're done. But as fate would have it, because we took ownership of our mistake, every single person gave us a second chance.
That's awesome.
Or most. And so this kind of, it leads into why we ended up going public. Our investors at that point were like, whoa, these guys don't know what they're doing. So we didn't get any more capital from them. We spent all the capital on the mistake and fixing it. And so we ended up, I mean, I'm from Abbotsford, small town Abbotsford. I have no idea how to raise money, right? So we are kind of finding different people in New York, making phone calls, pitching, figuring out different ways to pitch people. And then kind of one thing leads to another. And this guy's like, we like naked. We think we could do something like that. We'll take you public. I'm like, great. I have no idea what that means. But it sounds
That's
great.
amazing.
I mean, like I didn't grow up in a house where my parents traded stocks or had investment portfolios. It was, they may had RRSPs. Like that was like the extent of my family's financial acumen at the time.
But I think that's like most people, though, to be fair.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you even meet people with money in certain industries, and he said, we're going to take it public. And that might be like, what does that really mean? Right.
Totally.
And so fortunately, my business partner was a CPA, and he was up for the task of figuring out how to take a company public and, operate in a public company. And as a result of that experience, he's built an incredibly successful accounting practice over the long term here. But we went public on the OTC, which is like it's a bulletin board exchange that's kind of lower on the totem pole as far as things go. If you put like Nasdaq and in the New York at the top, and then maybe the TSX and whatever else international, and then down there is the OTC. So we listed on there, and it took a year, and it took way more money than we thought, but it put us in this whole new trajectory where now we were raising money in the United States, and I was spending a lot more time down there. Contacts were building, and we were kind of doubling up on everything, right? So I'd go to a city, and in that city, like call it Portland, I'd meet a room full of investors in the morning for breakfast, present, why they should invest in the stock. And then in the afternoon, I'd go and train the Nordstrom's team. And then if we sold a menswear store, I'd go train that. And then I'd hop on a plane and do it in another city. And so it became this totally different life than we expected.
Okay.
But it had its pros and its cons. The business was growing, and our capital markets exposure was growing. But at the same time, my attention was so diluted from the core of the brand that, and this is possibly a mistake that, many entrepreneurs make. I like to forewarn entrepreneurs, is like, when you lose your ethos, when you lose your why, your brand can deteriorate. Your customers will know that. And so we were just signing on a big department store, and like a huge one. And they had all these demands, I guess you will, or expectations, maybe that's fair to say, of what we should do to our packaging and our pricing and our this and that. And so as a result of signing that customer, our life was changed in two ways, one positive, one negative. The positive was we had this big department store chain that added tons of credibility to us, and at the time, value to our stakeholders in the markets. But on the downside is we sort of abandoned the original vision of the company to cater to this beast. Things started to get made in China and this and that, and packaging changed, and so we lost some of our competitive advantage. And I'm just going here, Kevin. I don't know if you want.
No, this is good, man. This is really good. Keep going.
So again, it was like, damn, like, because like, to the entrepreneurs who listen to your show, more than anyone what you're trying to do, what you're trying to say, what you hope that means to the people you're saying it to, and why they're buying the products. And as you go through the growth of your startup, all of a sudden the room gets really noisy. And there's investors telling you what types of financings you should do and what types of structures you should finance your company through. And then there's this store who has this opinion and that store who has that opinion. And then there's the shareholders who have their opinions, and it becomes very noisy and harder, especially if it's your first rodeo, to be disciplined and patient and take the feedback. Absolutely. Don't have blinders, but to execute against the vision and only pivot when necessary. Like, for instance, if you started a business during COVID and you had to adjust due to the macro conditions in the world. And so, but we were like, to the point I'm making is we were pivoting left, right, and center, from financing structures to packaging, because I was just green and naive and eager and willing. And so I just took everybody's advice and like literally implemented all of it. And it created this mess of a capitalization table, like how, what our financing history looks like.
Sure.
And brand. And it got to the point where I'm like, I don't think I am qualified to run this company, despite any of the successes we've had. And I think shareholders deserve somebody better. And so that led to me, in my travels in New York, I got introduced to this incredible woman her name was Carol Hockman, and she had a very successful lingerie sleepwear business. She'd exited that business and was entertaining new positions. And so I offered her the job. She kind of was like, oh, do I want this? But she ended up taking it after, a series of conversations and time and going through those motions. And I ended up moving to New York. And then we spent a couple of years there, and then we got a knock on the door from a lingerie company called Bend On out of Australia. They had seen me present at a conference and asked, are you potentially looking to be merged with or acquired? And we saw this company that had like 4,500 stores around the world, their own stores in Australia. They had Heidi Klum as a spokesperson, and we're like, wow, like if we merge with these people, it's going to be way better. And the reality is, because I'm not here to sell I don't want to sell just the positives. The reality was we ended up doing that deal. And unfortunately, the value, sort of in the weeks and months and years to follow, greatly declined in the company. And some of our shareholders made out okay, some didn't. And it was a really hard experience to exit and then watch your baby just implode, and the people who believed in you, to watch them suffer. They're all professionals and
sure, wow,
they have losses, but for me, it was really personal, and that sort of spawned a very tough 4 years for me of anxiety, depression, assessment, like, and really it started even before the demise, because as any entrepreneur on this show who's been through this might know, like when we sold the first time and moved to New York and I gave up the CEO-ship, and you have to go through those motions of, okay, what is my value? What is my role? How do I contribute in this totally new environment? And it was a bit challenging. It was a bit, to say the least. And I struggled. That was kind of like the opening of like the who am I esoteric like self-discovery. And I'm sure if I'd had more dough at the time, I would have just zipped off and slept in a cave in India for a year, but I had kids and I had all these problems to deal with. So that's sort of a all over version of the naked story that, excludes many details, but happy to dive into anything else if you have questions.
No, I think that's a good overview of it, because I just wanted really you to tell that so people understand that, like, being an entrepreneur that even gets on the stock market and sells to a company, like it can go great, it can go terrible, it can go somewhere in the middle, like it's all over the place. And even when you think you're done and you're over, you can still keep going, right? And I think you just prove that all those things to kind of be true, right?
100%. It is, what is it? 9 out of 10 businesses or something like that are going to fail. And so if you set yourself up and you say, this is everything, if this fails, I'm done, I'm over, then you're setting yourself up for unnecessary heartbreak, because life is not like that. I always like to think about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about the hero's journey as well. And these iterations of our journey as human beings through our life. And so if we take any kind of classic movie, and you just follow that character's journey, right? They're this brash, young, confident hero who kind of thinks that there's nothing they can't do. And so they go out and they slay the, air quotes, dragons, and maybe they get a little bit lucky. And then some things happen and their fate is turned. And in order to recover themselves, I guess, if you will, through this all, they have to face these inner demons, these inner battles, right? Your ego, your ego being, in this, defining it in this sense, is like all the things that you've accepted to be true about yourself. And as a result of that, the stories you tell yourself every single day in your mind. So this has to be a certain way because, that has to be a certain way because. And in reality, none of that's true. Those stories came from somewhere and we latched onto them, whether it was like a TV ad that we watched that told us we had to be thin, or something that, told us we had to be rich. And without those things, we're nothing. That's just sort of a small example. These stories literally affect every interaction. We can affect every interaction we have, and more importantly, affect the inner world that we live in and day out in our heads, right?
Totally.
And so in going back to the hero's journey is like, you have to start slaying these own demons inside yourself. In the movie, it's like, there's actual demons you're slaying, and it's metaphor for your own, right? And then you emerge from this journey as a much wiser hero, where your motivations are not for the self. Your motivations are more for a greater cause, whether that's your kids, the well-being of your employees, some sort of impact around the world. And you realize that the bravery that you have to bring every day to being a human being, not just being an entrepreneur, is is about realizing your mortality. Sorry, we're going deep here.
No,
And
that's good.
so the what I mean by that is, like, in life, your vulnerability and your mortality and your humanness and really your lack of control of everything, and sort of accepting that. But in business, it's the same thing. It's accepting that this business, I don't control its fate. I will do everything I can to make it successful, but I don't control its fate. And once you've been through that process, you realize that, like, life is really just like one hero's journey after the next,
Totally.
after the next, and you're never done.
Yep.
Right? But the thing that's changed is the mindset that you've brought into each of these things. That's what's changed, and how you feel about each of these things as you go about them, right? So the stakes of me being a runner, snapping my Achilles, freaking out, deciding to hitchhike across the country because I was so ashamed of not being a runner and so confused as to who I was. And then with regards to naked, again, it's like, naked is everything. If I don't have it, I'm nothing. And here I got a wife and 2 kids and friends and family, all these things that are like, I have made very secondary in my life. And I then realize that I have to bring these things back into my life and understand that everything can iterate and everything can lead into something else. Better, maybe, similar, but that's for you to decide based on your opinion of it. But so that's kind of, very long way of saying that, like, being an entrepreneur, this is not my quote, is a way of life. It's not just one thing. It's not just starting a business. It's literally how you have decided to live your life, and that includes your business, and that includes your own mental health, and that includes those who are dependent upon you, those who you love. It includes all these different things. It includes continuous learning. And so I look at it very holistically now, whereas before I looked at it very myopically. Is that the word? Yeah,
Sure.
And so that's been the change of things for me, and that's a constant battle. I am not on the other side of that ego battle by any means.
Sure. And maybe you never get on the other side, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean just you. I mean just like people in general.
You're 100% right. I mean, that's our experience as human beings, as entrepreneurs, is to live this duality that we all suffer, right? Or have, right? That the good times, the bad times, the dark, the shadow, the light, we're always battling these things. And we just have to learn how to do that better, how to separate from it more, how to understand where it's coming from, why it's coming from there, so that we can, deal with it better. And, our egos get in the way of so many things and if we don't deal with those things, they, in the most macro sense, they can turn into war, right? With another country. And in a micro sense, it can turn into sending an email that you never should have sent, because you just were responding out of, your ego, you're responding out of a wound, and you're just lashing out. And so many of our struggles, so many things that I have struggled through personally, professionally, they all could have been avoided if I just had learned to shift my mindset. And that's where I'm at today, I guess, is I want to see, from what I have seen with my friends that are entrepreneurs, with the people I know, is there is not an equal growing of, as somebody achieves success, they simultaneously achieve happiness.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so I'm looking, if there's anything that I can contribute to, as a mentor, as a coach, as a friend, it's how can I help people cultivate both simultaneously?
Sure.
Because I saw how just going after one nearly destroyed my life. So that's, that's where my head's at these days. Who knows, it might change, but
No, I think that's good though, right? Because I think in some cases, the more successful you are, the more you have to lose. And your happiness is almost like worse off in some cases, right? And it's like, which is like a really hard thing to swallow sometimes. You're like, well, I'm successful. Everybody thinks I'm successful, but like, I feel like I'm not successful at all. And like, I haven't achieved this success that everybody thinks I have, right? And so like, then you feel like a fraud. And it's like, you can go down. So like, I appreciate that you called that out. And it's awesome that you're helping people manage that through your life coaching. And I want to get more into your life coaching in a second. But through all the highs and lows that you went through in the clothing industry, you decided to do another travel clothing brand. So do you want to talk about that quick as well before we get into the life coaching stuff?
certainly. Yeah.
I think it's good, man. Like it's what it takes, right? And the reality of it is like some days it's the best and worst decision you've ever done. And I'll give you one of those two answers depending on the 15-minute interval that I'm in currently, right? And so people need to understand this and understand that other people are going through the exact same highs and lows that they're going through. And you were successful in a lot of people's eyes with Naked, but and in your eyes you may or may not agree with that, but it doesn't really matter, right? Like you're working through the good and bad of that, and you're back at it doing it again.
100%. And that's what, we all have to do. Whether you're an entrepreneur, which, we're geared towards here, or that's just, with your kids.
Yep.
And you have a bad day parenting, or with your boss and, or your colleagues, and you have a bad day at the office, even if it's not your company. I mean, we all have that responsibility and accountability to ourselves to do exactly what we're talking about, just bring our best self despite the challenges that we're doing. And also in that same vein, have enough reverence and grace for ourselves that we accept when we don't do it well, which will be the majority of the time for most of us. These podcasts are like where you and I, or you and all your guests get to kind of like shower their lessons learned, and it makes it sound so easy and quotable or whatever. But in reality, every single one of us is doing battle with their own demons, with the details of their business, with the highs and lows of their business, with their personal lives every single day. And it, to me, it's like laddered up to the only thing you can do is have grace and reverence to both yourself, because beating yourself up in many respects doesn't make you better. Holding yourself accountable to higher expectations and working to improve, absolutely, but beating yourself up serves you not. Also, and this is a digression, but beating up your employees, beating up somebody on Instagram or Twitter or wherever serves nobody.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
going to serve them, right? And so, but it's so hard to kind of, always take that into your daily life, right? And I guess to segue back to why I went back into the apparel business, we started a company called Khao San Travel. It was named after Khao San Road, Khao San Road, which is in Bangkok, Thailand, and it's like the center of the backpacking universe. And so we wanted to pay homage to that street because that's where a lot of people's journeys begin and sometimes even end. And it just is like a melting pot. And so that's kind of the vibe. And I wanted to start a business that I could see myself doing for 40 years. And any business that had travel attached to it was a business I could see myself doing for a long time. I wanted a very cause-based brand. Khao San aligned itself with Amnesty International and has a mission to support human rights around the world, and so we give percentage of all our sales to those causes through Amnesty. And but I was very, very hesitant, like incredibly hesitant to do it again after what I'd just been through. And the thing that I regret more than anything is that my body and my mind and my spirit kept telling me when Naked was done and I was like literally just battered and beaten on the ground, from hate from shareholders and just my own hate and frustrations. And so I was like, I need a rest. And I didn't give myself that rest. And because what happened was we're like, well, we'll test a product on Kickstarter and see how we do. And so we delved into this. We did one Kickstarter and, we did like $100,000 and it was okay. I think at the time, like $100,000 put you in like the top 1% of all Kickstarters. So I was like, okay. And then we did another one, but we took a very research data-driven design process, which is the first time I'd ever done this in a business, where instead of saying, hey, Joel likes this product or so-and-so designer likes this product, and yes, you've done some R&D and you've done, you've done some competitive analysis and you decide that this product you're going to make it because of those things, but mostly because you want to make it, right? Like you like it. So instead of that, we went through a really interesting process where we used SEO results to determine what the most searched travel items were for clothing. And travel dress came up number one. So what that told us was that people did not have a defined answer to the question of where do I go and get a travel dress. Extrapolated out, it also told us that there was no defined answer to where people went to get any of their travel clothing. It was kind of like, I'll go to Amazon, I'll go to Mountain Equipment Co-op in our Canadian sense, or REI in the American sense. It was fragmented. And so there was a consolidation opportunity to that story. And so that was, we're testing this theory. And so we take dress shows up number one. So let's make a dress. But instead of just making a dress, what we do is like we sketch out, let's say 6, refined these 6, they're based on comps, data, etc. And then we go to our customers and we say, which of these 6 dresses are you most likely to buy?
Interesting.
And we take the top 2. And then we create a list of features and we say, which of these features are most important to you? And additional to that, how much would you be willing to pay for these features, pay up for these features in this product? And so we give prices, we give a price range, and then we take that data back and we go develop, we've led them to this place, but they've helped us, be the funnel to get to the end execution, or the end design, I should say. And then the last thing we do on that is colors. And we say, okay, we decide the colors, we decide the color trends, but then we go to our customers and say, of these 6 colors, of these 8 colors, which 2 are you most likely to take? And we will then execute on those colors. So what we do through that process is we minimize as much risk as we possibly can, because our customers have not only helped us make those decisions as much as you can trust that data, but they've also become emotionally invested in the process through that.
Right.
And so to say, okay, what did that net out to be? Well, that netted out to be a near $1 million Kickstarter. So in 30 days of sales, we sold almost $1 million worth of one dress after kind of going through that process.
Wow. Congrats, man. That's huge.
Yeah, it was like, it's like you're addicted. It's like gambling or something. You go every day and you watch your like Kickstarter just go up and up and up and up. And so we're like, oh, there's product market fit. And so we just,
that's awesome.
We dove into it, and there was never that reprieve, and there probably wasn't enough of the process of reflection, post naked, pre-cosan, and just regenerating, right? Because like to borrow a running example, and some people are really good at this. I'm terrible at it. When you're running, or when you're doing anything fitness related, the gains are made in the rest, not in the workouts.
Yeah.
The workouts break you down. They break you down to the point of which you almost burn out. When you're working a muscle, that muscle tears and has to heal in order to grow back stronger. And so the same is true of life. Like in running, we would have, it was periodization, right? You would have cycles of intense training followed by periods of rest and recovery, so that the effects of that training could take hold and maximize your performance. And by the time you're in, air quotes, racing season, you're barely training hard at all because your body's already done all the work. And so you're peaking in that sense, right? And then after the peak, your body comes down the other side and you take time off to recover and recharge. And then the next year, theoretically, if you're injury free, you should improve from upon that point. But in business and in life, we don't do that. I mean, you have to be a high level CEO, in a very big company to get proper vacation time.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, you could work 10 years without proper rest. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with working really, really, really hard consistently. But we don't take those rests. And those rests in the entrepreneurial space, I think they bring about clarity and decision-making. I think they bring about creativity. They allow you to have better moods as you deal with your staff or you deal with situations. But it's so hard to carve out that time. And I never did. I didn't take a vacation for 10 years. And I think for me personally, it affected my performance and, trying to learn it. I'm not sure if you felt the same way, Kevin. But
100%. 100%. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. But like, how does that transfer into, obviously you're still doing Hosan travel, but now you're also doing a life coaching as well. And you have an online course. Do you want to talk about the life coaching and what the course is about?
Certainly. Let's be honest, like COVID-19 shook a lot of people in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I realized was that, I had a travel clothing company and literally the world of travel shut down.
Yep.
And there was no predictability as to when it would return. Even today, there's indicators that are positive, but to what degree, when? I mean, obviously we're extremely confident it will return to 2019 levels, but it might take 2 years. People love to travel. So the first lens I looked at things through was wanting to help, wanting to give back to entrepreneurs with all the lessons I'd learned. And the second piece was I had a book coming out and I wanted to be able to have coaching as part of, and courses as part of that sort of package, if you will, that allowed people to dive deeper into some of the lessons of the book, whether that was through with me personally or through some sort of online course. And the third reason was, again, protecting my downside. I've always looked at, or diversifying my my interests, where I've always looked at entrepreneurs should be single-mindedly focused on their business, and anything else outside of their most important demands, be that family or other things that you're involved in, you just focus on your business. And I still believe that to a very real extent, but now I'm looking at it as, okay, if we end up in a post-pandemic world, or world, the new normal, if you will, where there's more pandemics, or there's more sort of quick to shut down things if they think that there's a disease. How do I have other avenues of which I am, contributing and or bringing in income to, myself, my family?
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's just being totally honest.
No.
Obviously that's a driver for it. And so I spent the summer saving Kosan from, with my partners, from all the pain and agony of COVID, which meant making a lot of masks and, applying to a lot of different bids and bringing in PPE and doing different things like that, alongside trying to sell the existing products that we had, while sort of in the wee hours of the night developing this course and this sort of new side platform for me, which has only been accelerated. I'd always wanted to have this as a part of my life. COVID just kind of accelerated it, if you will.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the brutal honesty, but I also think you have the experience of the highs and lows to actually help people through what they're going through, right? So I think it's a very much a natural progression. And in some ways, like the fact that you kind of had to do it because you've always wanted to do it and you got a push to do it. Sure, it's from a negative thing, but you turned like something that's negative into a positive, right? To help other people again is pretty cool, right? And I think a lot of people, it's a struggle to do that, right? To turn something that's so negative into a positive, especially when you're helping other people do it.
It is hard. It is hard, and that kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation. It's not kudos to me. This is like, there's lots of incredible people who've done this for centuries upon centuries.
Sure.
and taken a really, I guess you could say, sort of stoic mindset to things, and trying to find those positives as in any situation, and or just trusting that negative will lead to a positive down the line. Steve Jobs talked about it in Stanford, or whatever one of his commencement speeches. He talked about the dots connecting, and that's really true. It's like, this is just a moment. This moment will pass, and it will lead to different things that are potentially better or just different, but it will still lead to other things. Life will continue to go on. To put that into perspective, and once this is kind of leads into the course, and when I have a worksheet in my online course where I tell you to look back and look at all these negative moments that turn into positive things, to see how these dots connect, so that you can have trust in having a transformation and taking steps into unknown territory for yourself. And that is, one simple story is that one of my first businesses I started was actually a magazine in Abbotsford. Okay. I thought we needed a cool millennial focused magazine. We wrote some articles, we got some advertisers, and I kind of got stuck halfway. And then I went to the local newspaper to try and sell the magazine to them as like a subcat business for them. And they said, right, no, you come work for us. We'll give you a paycheck. And so I said, okay, that's probably better. So magazine went bye-bye. I ended up getting a job at the news, but I'm a terrible employee. And it was like very soon into that experience that I was already on the fritz. And then eventually my boss, a guy named Ben Coles, he said, listen, you're an entrepreneur. You don't belong in a corporate structure like this. And so he let me go. And then literally the very next day, because he'd heard about Naked, he'd seen the Dragon's Den episode, he's like, are you looking for investors? So not only did Ben, the day after, a couple days after he fired me, become my largest shareholder in my first round, but it just so happens, and I didn't know this at the time, that he's a fantastic and published writer, and he became the co-author of my book that's launching.
Interesting. Very cool.
So our life is just filled with these things, but we don't take a moment. And so the idea of the course is that it kind of takes you through 3 parts over 3 weeks, where I want people to dig into, what's really true for them in this moment in time. Are they, I have like an integrity check-in. Are you being true to yourself? Okay, you are. What's blocking you from that thing? Like, what are your triggers? What are the invisible tethers that keep you bound to this, whether that's bad behavior, bad habits, bad career choices, stuck in a job you don't want to do? What are all those things? And then we go from there, and we put together daily habits, journaling practices, different sort of lifestyle design exercises that hopefully help you shift. They worked for me, so hopefully they work for others. Shift out of those. And then the last piece is just going into more of the letting go and the visualizing forward, where we always have to let go, right, Kevin? Like, you have to create space for newness to come in. You have to let go of things that are holding you back, and simultaneously you have to invite the things you want into your life. So that's sort of like, it's a 21-day course that encapsulates 3 years journey for me personally and professionally into a series of worksheets. And I just, it's self-guided, but I really wanted people to have those tools to go after it themselves if they don't feel like they're in a place that they want to be. That's a decision for them to make.
No, I think that's awesome, man. But sadly, we got to close the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about all the stuff we talked about, the clothing company, your upcoming book, the course, and your life coaching?
I appreciate it, man. Like, it's been, I feel like I talked a lot. So
good.
sorry.
Nobody wants to hear the host talk.
But yeah, you can find everything on joelprimus.com. Right now, the book's just being finalized before it can be pre-ordered. So right now, the course, anything about sort of naked or cosan, you can link to it anywhere from joelprimus.com. That's the best place to find me, or Instagram at joel.primus.
Perfect, Joel. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
You too, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com, and keep building the future.